The palace ballroom sparkled like starlight as countless noblewomen twirled across polished marble, each hoping to capture the heart of King Magnus. Meanwhile, Arya was on her knees, scrubbing stubbornly at a wine stain. She possessed no title, no wealth to offer, just a common wolf from conquered territories, destined only to clean up after anxious noblewomen as they were swept onto the dance floor. 3 more hours, Arya muttered under her breath. Just 3 more hours until this spectacle ends. She sat back, pushing a rebellious auburn curl from her face as her eyes traveled across the ballroom to where her king moved smoothly from lady to lady. His smile remained constant, his attention appearing genuine until the precise moment he shifted to the next woman. That was simply Magnus's nature. Fickle with his affections, generous with his charm. A dangerous combination for royalty. As though sensing Arya's observation, the king's gaze suddenly found hers across the crowded space, and he winked, one corner of his mouth lifting playfully. Arya scowled in response. She was completely immune to his charms. Or more accurately, entirely devoted to appearing immune to his charms, which proved far more achievable. As if being an alpha wasn't sufficient, Magnus had to be devastatingly attractive as well, leaving half the female wolf shifters across 7 kingdoms sighing over him. Tonight wasn't merely any royal gathering. It had been specifically arranged for him to select a bride. His advisors had finally collectively insisted. They'd grown thoroughly weary of his playboy tendencies, and not simply because they desired an heir to secure the bloodline. The diplomatic complications that followed the king's habit of seducing noble daughters had become a legitimate political concern. Well, Arya thought bitterly, his terrible reputation hasn't prevented 100 noblewomen and princesses from attending tonight. Perhaps it was his vast, prosperous kingdom that attracted them. Or perhaps it was those perfect dimples that appeared when he smiled. Arya wouldn't know. She absolutely didn't notice details like that, just as she didn't notice how his laugh made something warm unfurl in her chest. Chapter 1. The Confrontation. Arya cursed under her breath as a passing nobleman nearly crushed her hand beneath his boot. His scent, reeking with arrogance, reached her before his shadow did. "Is there a reason you're blocking my path, girl?" the noble asked coldly. "To better lick your boots, sir." "Why else?" Arya replied sweetly. The nobleman's face darkened with fury. "How dare you?" A shadow fell over them both, and the man's complexion suddenly drained of color. Arya didn't need to turn around to know exactly who stood behind her. "Lord Kellen," Magnus's voice was silk draped over steel. "I believe the Emberwood delegation is searching for you." The nobleman retreated without another word, and Arya would have considered thanking Magnus for dismissing him if he hadn't been, well, Magnus. "Enjoying your evening, Freckles?" the king asked smoothly, stepping into her line of vision. Arya pointedly ignored him. He absolutely despised being ignored. It drove him to distraction. "That stain coming off as you'd hoped?" Magnus persisted. As Arya continued her silence, she saw movement from the corner of her eye, and the next thing she knew, red wine was pooling on the floor beside her. She looked up to see Magnus deliberately emptying his glass onto the marble. "Oh, how clumsy of me," he said with an unrepentant grin. "Don't you have other people you can torture?" Arya finally snapped. "Like one of the countless ladies who traveled all this way just to entertain you?" "They're just not as entertaining as you," Magnus protested. "I mean, I can hardly ask them to clean up after me, can I?" "Yet you can hardly keep your hands off them either," Arya muttered. His eyes immediately gleamed with interest. "And does that bother you, Freckles?" he asked. "The only thing that bothers me is having to witness it," she said instead. "Well, for someone who despises watching it, you stand there staring for an awfully long time whenever it happens," Magnus teased. "One might think you were enjoying the show." Arya flushed hot with embarrassment. "I do not enjoy watching you," she began. "Your Majesty," a voice interrupted. "A noblewoman. Lady Alara from Westhold, appeared at Magnus's side, practically thrusting a crystal goblet into his hands. "Please allow me to fetch you another drink," she purred. Arya gaped at the woman, shocked by her utter lack of dignity. Magnus had sent her packing 3 months ago without so much as a proper goodbye. Yet here she was at his beck and call like an eager puppy. Arya would never debase herself like that for any man, Alpha King or not. "Freckles," Magnus said, his eyes never leaving Arya's face as he accepted the drink. "Can you fetch me one of those strawberry desserts from over there?" Arya stood with a grunt. All right, maybe she would, but only because it was literally her job to be at his beck and call. That was entirely different from Lady Alara's shameful display. Entirely. Can you believe it? Marcus appeared beside her, nervously adjusting his livery. "Our king getting engaged tonight." Marcus was Magnus's valet, a job that seemed to leave him in constant anguish. "I really can't," Arya admitted. "Oh, aren't you even a little excited?" Marcus nudged her. "Think of it, a royal wedding. Celebrations throughout the kingdom." Arya snorted. "That man can't keep his attention on a woman for more than a few days. He's not about to do it for a lifetime. Look at him already dancing with someone new." "If you ask me, he only does it because he knows you're watching," Clara said, a kitchen maid slipping in beside them. "He does it because he can't stand the idea that someone might not worship him," Arya shot back. She'd long ago realized her indifference was the only thing keeping Magnus's attention. If she ever melted under that golden gaze like the others, he'd move on in an instant. And that was exactly what she should want. To be free of his irritating presence and the foolish daydreams. And yet, when his eyes found hers across the dance floor, Arya knew she'd never stop aggravating him. She couldn't bear the thought of those eyes never seeking hers again. "A mating bond is forever," Clara pointed out. "Once he chooses his mate? If he even bothers." Arya cut her off, heart skipping. "Which I doubt. He's much too fickle." True mates were rare among wolves, rarer still among royalty, where politics always outweighed fate. Stuart Hamilton strode past with his clipboard, then stopped. "That's our king you're speaking of," he hissed. "Mind your words." Arya bit her tongue instead of saying that he had the maturity of a 12-year-old because she'd known him at 12 and he hadn't changed since. "It was all well and fine for you to play with His Majesty as children," Hamilton continued. Arya nearly laughed. A memory rose unbidden. Magnus slipping a snake into her bed, her chasing him with it through the gardens, both of them ending up in the fountain. Play? Hardly. They'd tormented each other. The good old days. "But now," Hamilton droned on, "you must learn your place and show proper decorum." Arya ignored him. Something about Magnus's movements had caught her eye. He blinked rapidly as if struggling to focus, his steps faltering. "Is he drunk?" she murmured. "Arya?" Hamilton sputtered. "See, this is exactly what I mean. You can't just imply—" "Shh." She cut him off, straining her senses. Magnus stumbled, catching himself on a table, then swayed. His goblet slipped from limp fingers. "Something's wrong," Arya said, her body tensing. "Magnus," she pushed through the crowd. "Arya, you can't just call the king by his— Where are you going, Arya?" Hamilton's protests faded. Magnus never showed weakness in public. If he was faltering now, it was serious. "Freckles," he breathed when he saw her, relief flickering across his face. He leaned heavily against her as she grabbed his arm. "What's wrong?" she whispered. His golden eyes tried to focus. I think I—" His words died as his eyes rolled back. He collapsed and Arya lunged, catching him before he hit the floor. His weight drove her to her knees, his body limp against hers. "Magnus," she whispered, cradling his head and brushing back his dark hair. "Stay with me, please." For a heartbeat, his gaze cleared. He looked at her face with something like wonder. Then his hand slipped to the ground, and the ballroom erupted in chaos. Chapter 2. The poison. Revealed guards rushed forward as courtiers recoiled, gasps rippling through the ballroom. Someone screamed about assassins. "Step away from His Majesty," ordered a guard, reaching for Arya's arm. She jerked back. "Don't be stupid, Lawrence, it's me." "Sorry, Arya, Captain's orders." "Oh, tell Victor where he can shove his orders," she snapped. More guards closed in, shielding them from the panicked nobles. Hamilton's voice carried over the chaos, commanding that no one leave. Diplomats protested, nobles sobbed, and someone demanded their ambassador. None of it mattered. Arya's gaze stayed on Magnus's still form, her heart hammering. What would grandmother do? Her grandmother, once the royal healer, had trained her well before passing last winter. Arya steadied herself, pressed 2 fingers to Magnus's neck and nearly collapsed with relief at the steady pulse. His forehead was cool, but not alarming. No discoloration on his nails. "Magnus," she whispered, clutching his limp hand. "Can you hear me?" "Squeeze my fingers." Nothing. "Make way for the royal healer." A small, wiry woman with silver-streaked hair pushed through, Madame Lydia, her grandmother's successor. "What happened?" she demanded, kneeling. "He collapsed suddenly," Arya said, shifting aside. As Lydia examined him, Arya's eyes caught on the goblet that had slipped from Magnus's hand. Ducking past the guards, she snatched it up and sniffed. Beneath the wine's aroma was something floral and sweet. Her wolf senses prickled. Tracking sense was her gift, even if she'd never joined the royal guard like she'd dreamed. The late king had barred women from service, and by the time he died, it was too late for her training. But no one in the palace could match her nose. Scanning the crowd, her gaze landed on Lady Alara near the doors, wringing her hands. Earlier, she'd pressed a drink into Magnus's hand. Their eyes met. Alara's widened. "It was her!" Arya shouted, pointing. "She poisoned the king!" The ballroom froze. "It's not what you think," Lady Alara cried. "He's going to be fine. I can help him." The steward faltered. "Wait, are you saying you did poison him?" "Yes," Alara blurted, then backpedaled. "No, well, not exactly." "Not exactly?" Captain Victor's hand went to his sword. Arya seized Alara by the shoulders. "What does that even mean? What did you do to him? Is he dying?" "He's asleep." Lydia's calm voice cut through the tension. "Asleep?" "Yes," Alara said triumphantly. "See, he's perfectly fine, just taking a quick nap." "You drugged him?" Arya roared. "Were you hoping to kidnap him while everyone was distracted?" "Of course not," Alara protested, tears welling. "I would never harm him. I love him." "Arrest her," Arya snapped. "She drugged His Royal Highness at a royal ball. Clearly, she has bad intentions." "My intentions were pure," Alara insisted, "and driven only by the purest of love." The very idea that this noblewoman could speak of love after what she'd done made Arya's wolf want to tear something apart, preferably Alara's fancy gown. All right, Stuart Hamilton interrupted. "Lady Alara, perhaps you could explain to us why you gave His Majesty a sleeping potion." Alara lowered her gaze demurely. "It's not exactly a sleeping potion," she said softly. Arya lunged forward, fingers curled like claws, but Alara hastily added, "It's a love potion." A beat of silence fell across the ballroom, followed by an explosion of voices. "A love potion? Isn't that illegal? She's trying to enchant His Majesty." The last accusation came from a princess who pointed at Alara with the outrage of someone who had caught a rival cheating at cards. "Everyone shut up," Arya roared, her voice carrying the commanding tone of a wolf who expected to be obeyed. Surprisingly, the room fell silent. "You," Arya snapped her fingers at Stuart Hamilton, "have someone interrogate this lady in detail about what exactly she means by love potion, what was in it, how to cure it, everything." "I can tell you right now," Alara jumped in excitedly. "And you," Arya cut her off, pointing to Captain Victor. "We need a full report on how a guest could have smuggled an illegal potion into a royal function under all our noses." The captain nodded, looking appropriately chastened. "Shouldn't we put someone more competent in charge of handling this?" a foreign diplomat asked, eyeing Arya with obvious suspicion. Approving murmurs erupted across the room, but Arya ignored them. She approached the diplomat with narrowed eyes, her wolf senses detecting the spike in his scent that indicated nervousness. "Did you help Lady Alara harm His Majesty?" she asked, meeting his gaze directly. "What? Of course not." "Then why is your heart rate so high?" Arya interrupted, crossing her arms. The diplomat swallowed visibly. "I merely meant that surely His Royal Highness would prefer someone other than a mere maid to handle his affairs," he said. "You'd be surprised," the steward muttered under his breath. Hamilton sighed, beckoning Arya over. "He has a point," he whispered when she approached. "I have no doubt His Majesty would trust you to help, but think of how this looks in front of all these other kingdoms, Arya. You're not a noble. You're not a guard. We have enough on our plates here." Arya clenched her jaw. As much as she hated to admit it, Hamilton was right. This was already an international incident. Having a maid apparently in charge would only make things worse. "I'll tell you everything I know," Alara interjected. "Which includes how to wake His Majesty." Arya stiffened. "How to wake him," she repeated. "You mean he's not going to do that on his own when the drug wears off?" Another long silence fell over the room. "Well, not exactly," Alara admitted sheepishly. Arya lunged for her again, this time with a scream, only to be restrained by Captain Victor's strong grip. "But it's going to be fine. Really," Alara insisted, backing away slightly. "Like I said, this is a love potion, so His Majesty will wake up through an act of true love." When her announcement was met with blank stares, she clarified. "Basically, he must be kissed by the woman he truly loves." Arya's stomach dropped to her feet. "The woman he truly loves," she repeated, incredulous. "But he falls in love every 5 minutes. How are we supposed to determine which woman he truly loves?" Alara tossed her hair back, confidence radiating from her posture. "The spell wouldn't have worked if he didn't truly love someone," she explained. "Which, of course, is me. I just needed something to prove it to everyone." "Prove what exactly?" Captain Victor demanded, his hand still on his sword. Alara's expression transformed into one of passionate sincerity as she addressed the stunned crowd. "Magnus and I are in love," she declared, her voice carrying throughout the ballroom. "We have been for months. But because his council," she shot a venomous glare toward the group of older men hovering nearby, "insisted he find a princess for a mate, he was forced to send me away." "That's not really what happened," one of the council members began. "I did this," Alara interrupted, "to prove to him and to all of you the purity of our love. Surely you can't expect him to marry one of these princesses after magic proves that I'm the one he truly loves and wants as his queen." The ballroom erupted into chaos once more. Meanwhile, Arya stood frozen, a cold dread spreading through her. Was Magnus condemned to sleep forever? As people parted to let Alara approach him, Arya felt her heart constrict with an entirely different fear. What if Alara was right? What if Magnus had been secretly in love with her all along? The entire room watched in cautious awe as the lady knelt gracefully beside the king. "My love," Alara whispered loud enough for the front row to hear, "I'll bring you back to us." She bent down and pressed her lips to Magnus's in a sweet, careful kiss, and the room held its collective breath as she lingered there, then slowly pulled back, her expression expectant. But the king remained motionless, his breathing unchanged. Alara frowned, a flicker of doubt crossing her features. "Perhaps you need to put more feeling into it," suggested an elderly duchess from the back of the crowd. Alara tried again, cupping Magnus's face between her palms and kissing him with obvious passion. When she pulled away, Magnus was as deeply asleep as before. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd while Arya, who had been holding her breath without realizing it, slowly exhaled. "If His Majesty doesn't love Lady Alara," Hamilton said slowly, "then who does he love?" 100 pairs of eyes turned toward the assembled princesses, each one straightening her posture and adjusting her hair. This was going to be a very long night. Chapter 3. The Kiss Parade. The grand ballroom had transformed from a celebration into a spectacle. Magnus had been moved to a makeshift dais laid out on velvet cushions, and Arya stood at his side, self-appointed as the unofficial kiss coordinator. "The Western Isles princess will go first," Hamilton announced, consulting his clipboard. Arya narrowed her eyes at the approaching blonde. "This is ridiculous," Arya exclaimed. "She's never even spoken a word to Magnus." "It's His Royal Majesty to you," Hamilton snapped. "And how would you even know who he has or hasn't been acquainted with?" "I know everyone his worship is acquainted with," Arya replied, crossing her arms defensively. Over the years, she'd created an intricate intelligence network within the palace. Marcus told her whoever Magnus met with, the cook reported whoever he dined with, the maids whispered about whoever he looked at, and the royal postman let her read his correspondence. "The postman lets you do what?" Hamilton spluttered. "It's for His Majesty's own good," Arya replied, her attention already shifting to a princess with auburn hair attempting to cut ahead in line. "Get in the back, Isabella," Arya called out. "He doesn't like you." As the first princess approached, Arya's memory raced through a catalog of Magnus's romantic history. What if one of them was his true love? "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Arya intervened as the princess, kneeling beside Magnus, grabbed his hand. "You're meant to kiss him, not twist his arm." Bad enough that he kissed all these women when conscious and willing. Watching them take liberties while he lay helpless made her wolf howl with rage. As the princess leaned forward towards Magnus's lips. "What do you think you're doing?" Arya snapped again. "Kissing him," the princess sounded affronted. "On the cheek," Arya ordered, crossing her arms. "No one gave you permission to share saliva with him." The princess lowered her mouth toward the king. "For half a second, not more," Arya added as the girl's lips made contact with Magnus's skin. "No, for crying out loud," the princess exclaimed, furious. "Time's up," Arya said, practically dragging her away. "Oh, and look at that. He's still asleep. What a pity. Next." And so it went on, princess after princess, duchess after duchess. With each woman who bent over Magnus, Arya's control frayed further. "No touching his hair!" she barked as a duchess's fingers drifted too close to his dark locks. The panic was slowly driving her mad. What if they never found the right woman? What if Magnus remained in this enchanted sleep forever? Or what if Magnus's heart belonged to someone they hadn't considered? A memory surfaced, one Arya hated remembering, a conversation she'd overheard 4 years ago between Magnus and his father when the latter was still alive. She'd been bringing fresh linens to the king's chambers when raised voices from the study made her pause. "Is this a joke?" the old king had demanded. "A common girl with no land, no dowry, no prospects." "There is nothing common about her at all," Magnus had replied, his voice raw with emotion. Arya had never heard him so upset, so genuinely furious. "She means everything to me," he'd added. And his tone. He'd been serious then. Arya had known just from that tone, and it had pierced her heart, for everyone in the palace knew about Magnus's relationship with Olivia, a beautiful kitchen maid. "I know you're an embarrassment," his father had snapped. "And I swear if you don't put the ridiculous idea of mating with her behind you, I'll have her disappear from this palace indefinitely." Shortly after that overheard argument, Olivia had been sent to the country estate, and Magnus had changed. His easy smile had hardened into something more cynical. His playful nature had taken on an edge of recklessness, and he'd begun bringing home a parade of noble women, none lasting more than a week. What if all this time, all these women, had just been his attempt to forget about her? About Olivia? "That's the last one," Hamilton announced, checking his list as the final princess stepped away from Magnus. "Every eligible noblewoman at the ball has attempted to wake his majesty." A hush fell over the crowd as all eyes turned to Magnus, who remained as peacefully asleep as before. "Well, what do we do now?" someone asked, breaking the silence. Arya's throat tightened. "I think," she said slowly, "I might know who he truly loves." Several heads turned her way. "Finally," Captain Victor sighed in relief. "I was wondering when you'd—" "I think it's Olivia," Arya explained. The captain's face fell. "Who?" he asked. "The kitchen maid who worked here 4 years ago," Arya explained, throat tight. The council members exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly remembering the incident. "It's worth trying," Hamilton said finally. "We can send riders to fetch her immediately." Arya nodded, her heart like lead in her chest. "I'll go find Madame Bramble," she said, heading out to find the head of staff. If bringing Olivia back meant saving Magnus, then she would do it, even if it broke her in the process. Chapter 4. The Truth About Olivia. Arya found Mrs. Bramble in her usual domain, the staff quarters adjacent to the kitchens. "Mrs. Bramble," Arya called, "I need your help." The old woman looked up, her shrewd eyes taking in Arya's disheveled appearance. "You look terrible, child." "Thank you for noticing," Arya replied dryly. "I need to fetch someone from the country estate immediately." Mrs. Bramble's brows furrowed. "Why?" "Because we need to find Olivia," Arya explained. "The kitchen maid, the one Magnus, His Majesty, was involved with 4 years ago. The girl he loves." Mrs. Bramble stared at her in utter bewilderment. "Who?" Arya took a deep breath and recounted the evening's events. The love potion, Magnus's collapse, and Lady Alara's confession about true love's kiss. "So that's why we need to find Olivia," Arya concluded. "I think she might be his true love." Mrs. Bramble snorted, patting Arya's hand sympathetically. "Oh, I'm sure there are things we could try before resorting to that," she said, giving Arya a pointed look. "Well, we already tried everyone else," Arya replied, bewildered. "What do you think we should do?" Mrs. Bramble faltered slightly. "What do you mean you tried everyone else?" she asked. "I mean, every available young woman at the ball already kissed His Majesty," Arya explained. "Nothing worked." Mrs. Bramble's face fell in utter shock. "Oh, my dear," she said eventually, looking more emotional than Arya had ever seen her. "Well, not everyone, I guess," Arya amended, thinking through the palace staff roster. Tessa didn't kiss him. Tessa had been the only other female staff member left in the ballroom during Magnus's collapse. The rest of them, Clara, the other kitchen maids, the laundresses, had come and gone throughout the evening and hadn't been present during the event. Mrs. Bramble took Arya's hand and squeezed it. "I can't believe— Are you all right, my dear?" she asked, searching for her words. Arya shrugged awkwardly. "It's been a really long night." The memory of the past hours washed over her. The chaos, the fear, watching princess after princess kiss Magnus, and her face fell. "Of course it was, you poor thing." Mrs. Bramble nodded sympathetically. She disappeared briefly and returned with a plate of ginger biscuits, Arya's childhood favorite. As Arya nibbled on one, Mrs. Bramble pulled out a worn ledger and began flipping through pages. "Olivia was reassigned to the Eastern Estate," she murmured, running her finger down a list of names. "We can dispatch a messenger immediately, though it will take a few hours for her to arrive." "In the meantime," Mrs. Bramble continued thoughtfully, "perhaps we should try other measures just to be thorough." "What do you suggest?" Arya asked. "The rest of the staff could attempt to wake His Majesty," she said, eyeing her carefully. "In private, of course, to avoid creating a spectacle. I'd also like to interrogate Lady Alara first to ask for more details about the potion," Arya said. And there was a diplomat with her who seemed unusually nervous. You should enlist Captain Victor's help with that, Mrs. Bramble suggested. Official questioning is his line of work. Right, Arya agreed. I'll find him now. Captain Victor was in the antechamber outside the ballroom, deep in discussion with several of his lieutenants. Arya, he greeted. What news? I'd like to question Lady Alara further about the potion and the diplomat who was defending her. The captain hesitated. There's a complication. Lady Alara is actually sister to Queen Sylvia from the Eastern Territories who married King Caspian last spring. But Lady Alara didn't arrive with King Caspian's delegation. She came with Ambassador Reiner from Westhold, a completely different kingdom. So she might be working for Westhold, Arya asked. Could they have ordered her to harm Magnus? She felt sick at the thought. We need to question them both thoroughly. If this is some plot to manipulate Magnus or destabilize the kingdom, we need to know immediately. Captain Victor nodded. Let me handle the questioning, he said firmly. You have more important duties elsewhere. You need to make sure our king wakes up. Chapter 5. The Revelation. The king's bedchamber had been transformed into an impromptu throne room, though its monarch lay unaware upon the massive four-poster bed. A small audience had gathered to witness the staff's attempts to break the spell. Stuart Hamilton with his ever-present clipboard, Mrs. Bramble directing operations, a lone guard posted at the door, and Arya herself standing rigid at the bedside. One by one, the female palace staff entered, curtsied nervously, and placed hesitant kisses on the king's cheek. Each departure marked by the same disappointment, the same unchanging stillness from Magnus. Finally, Clara entered, the last of the staff. She stopped several feet away from the bed. I don't want to kiss him, she declared. Arya sighed. Not kissing His Majesty is treason, Stuart Hamilton exclaimed. It's not treason, it's good sense, Clara declared. If Arya couldn't wake him, clearly I'm not going to be able to. Arya blinked, confused. What do I have to do with anything? She asked. Well, if you ask me, Clara said, if anyone could wake him, it would be you. Obviously, Mrs. Bramble echoed with a sage nod. Arya snorted. The very idea was so preposterous that she could barely form a coherent thought. Mrs. Bramble stepped in. Clara, would you mind not adding salt to the wound? She chided. Think about poor Arya's feelings. Exactly, Arya exclaimed, relieved someone was talking sense. Then she paused. Wait, what feelings? The poor thing was essentially rejected mere hours ago, Mrs. Bramble whispered loudly to Clara. Excuse me? Arya's voice rose an octave. Rejected? How? I'd have to have attempted something to be rejected, and last time I checked, I haven't. Well, you did kiss His Majesty, Clara said matter-of-factly. Who is still asleep, despite the spell supposedly being broken if he's kissed by someone he loves? That's a rejection if you ask me. Arya opened her mouth to yell that she had not kissed him. Thank you very much, but something in Mrs. Bramble's suddenly suspicious expression made her pause. Miss Arya hasn't kissed His Highness yet, though, Stuart Hamilton observed. Excuse me? Mrs. Bramble's head snapped toward him. She hasn't? Clara exclaimed, eyes wide. But Mrs. Bramble said, Arya. The head of staff turned towards her. Explain. Arya took an involuntary step backward, feeling cornered. Have your lips made contact with this man's or not? Clara demanded, pointing dramatically at Magnus. Arya glanced at his sleeping form, flushing crimson from neck to hairline. I don't know what you want me to tell you. Arya felt heat building behind her eyes. I didn't think I had to kiss him. She didn't think, Clara repeated, throwing her hands up. You said you tried everyone in the ballroom, Arya, Mrs. Bramble accused. I meant the princesses, Arya clarified desperately. Why would I count myself? Why would you not? Mrs. Bramble asked. His Majesty has been obsessed with you since you were children. Arya blinked rapidly. That's ridiculous, she said. Of course he's not in love with me. He's a prince. Well, a king now, so that's even worse. She swallowed hard. And all he's ever done is mock me and annoy me and parade beautiful women in my face. He interrupts my work and makes fun of my hair and calls me Freckles, even though he knows I hate it. She took a shaky breath. He flirts with everyone, but never with me. Ooh, you mean he treats you differently from everyone else? Clara translated with an eye roll. Arya's fist clenched. If he loved me, he would have told me, she exclaimed furiously. What's stopping him? He's the king, for heaven's sake. He can have anyone he wants. Unlike her, forever trapped as a maid, forever beneath his notice, except as an object of torment. Oh, I see. Clara nodded sagely. She's scared. That's why she didn't kiss him, if you ask me. Nobody asked you, Clara, Arya shouted, her composure shattering. In the startled silence that followed, Mrs. Bramble gripped Arya firmly by the shoulders. My dear, she said, her patience wearing thin. I understand that after years of romantic tension, you're a little nervous about finding out whether His Majesty loves you or not. But rest assured, she went on, you're the only one in this entire palace, save perhaps the steward, who has any doubt of how this is going to turn out. Well, she is just a maid, Stuart Hamilton interjected defensively. How was I to know His Majesty was in love with the maid when all he ever does is parade around with a horde of different women? Thank you, Arya exclaimed. Oh, for heaven's sake, the guard at the door suddenly exclaimed, startling everyone who had forgotten his presence. Do you want the king to wake up or not? Of course I do, the steward replied, affronted. Then, for the love of all that is good in this world, please shut up and let the girl kiss him, the guard exclaimed. Pushed by 3 sets of expectant eyes, Arya found herself at Magnus's bedside, looking down at his peaceful face. Just like him, to be sleeping blissfully while she tortured herself with silly ideas, heart hammering in her chest so hard she feared it might burst. Because of course she was scared. In the privacy of her mind, at least she could admit that. How many times had she wondered what it would be like to kiss him? How many nights had she lain awake imagining the feel of his lips against hers? How many times had she dreamed of this very moment, only to wake with the bitter taste of impossibility on her tongue? As long as she never tried, she could still hope. She could still tell herself that maybe, just maybe, beneath all his teasing and tormenting, he cared for her. But if she kissed him and he didn't wake, then even that small hope would die, and she would be left with nothing but the hard truth. She had always loved him and would always love him, regardless of whether he loved her back. Fine, she sighed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. In sleep, the king looked younger, the arrogant mask gone, leaving only Magnus, the boy who'd chased her through gardens, who'd argued with her over everything, and who'd stayed up all night by her side the night of her grandmother's passing. Taking a deep breath, Arya leaned forward. Her lips were inches from his when the door burst open. Olivia has arrived, announced a breathless messenger. Arya jerked back from Magnus as if burned, and the guard at the door unleashed a string of curses colorful enough to make even Clara blush. Chapter 6. The Wrong Girl. Arya jumped to her feet. Would you look at that? Olivia is here, she exclaimed with forced brightness, ignoring the bitter disappointment that sank like a stone in her stomach. Who? Clara frowned, looking toward the door. Olivia entered hesitantly, her eyes darting between the assembled faces before settling on Arya. She was still pretty in that delicate way, with soft brown hair and gentle eyes, the same woman who had once captured Magnus's attention. The memory of his voice, rough with emotion as he'd argued with his father over her, echoed in Arya's mind in an endless loop. Welcome back, Olivia, she said, the words sticking in her throat. Olivia smiled politely, though confusion was evident in her expression. I was told I needed to come see the king immediately. Her gaze drifted past Arya to the bed where Magnus lay motionless. "Is he all right?" "Yes, yes. Now that you're here, he will be," Arya assured her, pulling Olivia forward by the hand and leading her to Magnus's bedside. "All you need to do is kiss him." "This is all his fault," she exclaimed, her voice rising with indignation. Her carefully styled hair was coming loose, her eyes red-rimmed from what appeared to have been tears. "He made me think Magnus was in love with me." "Remarkably easy," Reiner snapped with the faintest hint of disdain. "You were so eager to believe it?" "You used me." Elara turned to the others. "He said the king loved me, that he'd heard Magnus had sent me away because I wasn't a princess. He was the one who thought of the love potion, how this would prove Magnus and I are meant to be together, and he brought it to me." Arya's mind raced to make sense of this new information. "But why?" she asked, unable to make sense of this revelation. The diplomat looked like he was going to ignore her, but a hard push from Captain Victor made him reconsider. "My actions were taken under direct orders from my king," he confessed, "whose daughter was once rejected by King Magnus." "Rejected?" Arya echoed, her brow furrowing. "Straight up rejected," Reiner confirmed with a slight sneer that betrayed his personal feelings on the matter. "Princess Isadora had fallen in love with him from afar," Reiner continued, his voice hardening. "She was utterly dejected upon his refusal. Her father, my king, was not just disappointed, but personally insulted. After all, King Magnus has quite the reputation as a—" his lip curled in distaste— "appreciator of female company. For him to publicly reject a princess of the Westhold royal line while continuing his liaisons with women of far lesser status, it was an insult that could not stand." "Are you saying your king wanted revenge?" Captain Victor stated flatly. "He wanted justice," Reiner corrected with practiced diplomacy. "So you thought to kill him?" the guard demanded, his hand moving to his sword. "Not kill him," Reiner replied calmly. "As many have pointed out tonight, including your healer, he is merely asleep." "For how long?" Arya exclaimed furiously. "We may never find who he truly loves." "It was never about that," Elara interrupted desperately, her voice cracking. "He lied to me," Reiner continued as if neither had spoken. "Princess Isadora was heartbroken, and my king humiliated. So he decided to humiliate Magnus in return." "By making him sleep?" the steward asked, clearly perplexed. "Lamest plan I ever heard," Clara muttered. "By making him realize that despite all his supposed charms and conquests, none of it meant anything," Reiner explained with cold precision. "Because it was never about him loving someone that would wake him up. It was about having someone really love him." A heavy silence fell over the room as his words sank in. "You mean that to wake him up with an act of true love, the person kissing him would have to truly love the king?" Mrs. Bramble asked slowly. "Not the other way around?" "Precisely." Reiner nodded, looking pleased. "And no one has. There were noble ladies from all across the continent at his ball tonight, all of whom failed at waking him. None of these women love him. So you've essentially murdered him," Victor growled, tightening his grip on the ambassador's arm. "We have not," Reiner assured him hastily, for the first time showing a flicker of genuine concern. "Should no one manage to wake him, he'll do so on his own within a couple of months. His sleep is enchanted. It's as if he is frozen in time, so don't worry about him dying of hunger during that period. However, a few months is enough time for everyone to know what happened, and he too will know when he wakes." There was a pregnant pause, and then, unexpectedly, Arya began to laugh. "I doubt hearing a couple of princesses he once flirted with weren't genuinely in love with him is going to break him." As she spoke, Arya felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. How dare they try to humiliate Magnus for something that wasn't his fault, for being exactly what he had been raised to be, guarded, distant, and unwilling to show vulnerability. Reiner's expression darkened. "Perhaps not," he snapped, composure cracking. But being incapacitated for months would destabilize his kingdom and make him look weak. Unless… The word dangled like bait. Arya could see the trap forming. Unless? The steward prompted. Unless our princess kisses him in the coming days, Reiner said. She truly loves him despite his rejection. She could wake him up immediately, put the incident to rest. In exchange for? Arya asked warily. For the king's hand in marriage, of course, Reiner replied with a thin smile. She is a princess. She deserves nothing less. Silence thickened. The snare had closed, not just to humiliate Magnus, but to corner him into the political marriage he'd already refused. It was clever. Low risk for them, high stakes for him. Well, that sounds like a perfectly reasonable offer to me, Mrs. Bramble declared. Unless, of course. Unless what? Reiner asked suspiciously. Unless someone who loves him kisses him first, Mrs. Bramble finished, eyes sharp. The diplomat scoffed. Everyone has kissed him. Nobody loves him. We know for a fact he only has short relationships. Well, you don't know much if you ask me, Clara drawled, inspecting her nails. Arya realized the entire room was staring at her. Her pulse quickened. Oh, will you stop? I am not in love with him, she blurted. She might have admitted it to herself, and it might be obvious to everyone else, but she'd rather die than say it aloud. Wait. Olivia's eyes widened. Oh. Yes, dear, Mrs. Bramble said patiently. Now would be a good time to get back to what you were up to before we were all interrupted. Arya shifted nervously, the weight of what she was about to do pressing down. But this wasn't about her pride. Magnus and the kingdom needed her. Right, she exclaimed, rushing to the bed. You don't mean to say she is about to kiss him, the diplomat cried, moving to stop her. Don't you dare, the guard barked, punching him square in the nose with a satisfying crack. Heart pounding, Arya knelt beside Magnus. What if it didn't work? What if her love wasn't enough? She leaned toward his cheek. On the lips, Clara shouted. Arya froze, then pressed her lips to Magnus's, lingering a heartbeat longer than necessary, breathing in his familiar scent of pine and smoke before pulling back, stomach twisting with doubt. What if nothing happened? I don't have time, she snapped, jabbing the poker into the flames with unnecessary force. The worst part wasn't Marcus's persistence, it was everyone else. The entire palace seemed to know she had woken Magnus with a kiss. It had become unbearable. Arya was seriously considering leaving the palace altogether. Perhaps the country estate needed a new housekeeper. Somewhere far from curious eyes and wagging tongues. Somewhere she wouldn't have to see Magnus every day and remember the moment when everything changed. Clearly, he interrupted, pushing away from the doorframe and stalking into the room with the grace of a predator. You've been remarkably difficult to find for someone who lives in the same palace. Arya straightened, forcing her expression into careful neutrality. I've been busy, she declared. So I've heard, Magnus said dryly. Let's see what's so important, shall we? He moved closer, studying the table she had been polishing, then running a finger along its gleaming surface. I had no idea dusting required such concentration that you couldn't spare 5 minutes in 2 days. Open, unguarded hurt that he made no attempt to hide. You didn't read them, did you? He murmured, disappointment evident in his voice. The expression on his face made her chest ache. It reminded her too much of the boy he had once been, watching with longing as her grandmother hugged her or showed her affection. She'd mistaken it for jealousy at the time, but later realized it was hunger for something he had never received himself. Don't look at me like that, she said, voice strained. Like what? Magnus asked quietly. Like you care, she thought desperately. Like I have some kind of power over you. She tried again to move past him. This time he didn't stop her, and for a terrible moment her heart cracked at the thought that he was letting her go. Then I'll just read them to you, he said from behind her. How's that? Arya quickened her pace, moving to another corner of the library. You don't have them with you, she pointed out. I remember them, he replied simply. And then you'd be reciting, she countered, which isn't the same thing as reading at all. Freckles, Magnus began, his voice shifting as he quoted his own words. I've just been told the most incongruous story about how for the past 10 hours I was apparently rendered unconscious, missed my own ball, was kissed by more than 100 women, and most incredibly yet, by you. I'd have not believed any of it if not for the fact that your scent still lingers, haunting me every second of every moment since I woke up. He paused as if waiting for her response. I was busy, she snapped, keeping her back to him. Magnus sighed and continued. Arya, I'm sorry. I would have come to you already, but I've been detained by my counsel. Will you please come find me so we can talk? Please. He paused again, letting the plea hang in the air between them. Well, obviously I couldn't, Arya shrugged, fighting to keep her voice steady. Now, if you're quite… Arya, he interrupted, his tone softer now. Let me be clear. Everyone's been telling me I was under a spell only sincere love could break, and you're the one that woke me. Could it be true? Do you love me? He hesitated briefly before continuing. Could you perhaps finally feel for me what I felt for you since I first laid my eyes on you all those years ago? Enough, Arya cried, her heart hammering against her ribs. Because surely you must know, Arya. Magnus continued as if he hadn't heard. How much I loved you then, and only loved you more and more since the day we… I said enough, she shouted, spinning around to face him. Tears were streaming down her face, her hands shaking as she stared at him. This isn't funny, Magnus. Do I look amused? He demanded, his own composure cracking. He didn't. He looked nothing like the confident king who had cornered her moments ago. His jaw was tight with tension, his eyes bright with what might have been unshed tears. You don't love me, Arya insisted, shaking her head in denial. I adore you, Magnus countered fiercely. Arya scoffed, burying her face in her hands. It's true, he insisted, his voice gentle. I didn't think… I thought you knew. Arya dropped her hands, staring at him in disbelief. Knew? Knew what? How can you even for a second believe that I would take you seriously, Magnus? After years of tormenting… You torment me right back, he retorted, the accusation effectively silencing her. And supposedly you have feelings for me. Unlike you, I'm not famous for my dozens of romantic endeavors, she shot back when she found her voice again. Magnus blinked, his expression shifting as if pieces were finally falling into place. So you really were jealous? He observed. Well, of course I was, Arya admitted, then laughed, a sad, broken sound that held no humor. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted to hear? No, Magnus said softly, approaching her with careful steps. Arya tried to evade. Yes, I love you, Magnus. How could I not? Her tears fell faster now, her voice cracking with emotion. Congratulations, you win. Magnus looked stricken, his earlier confidence completely gone. Arya, I didn't mean to upset you. Oh, so what? You just thought, let me confront dear old Arya about her feelings. Flatter my ego a bit. It'll be fun, she accused bitterly. Did you not think it would hurt me to be confronted with the fact that while you're the most important person in the world to me, I'm nothing but your servant? The raw pain in her voice made the words even more devastating. Did you not hear the part where I said I also love you? Magnus asked, sounding genuinely affronted. Arya snapped her mouth shut, turning away again. You said adored, she corrected stubbornly. There was a pause heavy with unspoken emotion before Magnus spoke again. I love you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'm in love with you, Arya. I don't know why you won't believe me. Because you've had hundreds of women, she countered, still not facing him. And it's always the same, isn't it? Did you also tell them you loved them? When she finally turned, Magnus's expression was a mixture of hurt and guilt that made her heart twist. No, he said firmly. I never told anyone that. Arya shook her head. I did, however, tell most of them I loved you, he added. That was quite frequent. Arya stopped short. What? She whispered. These hundreds of women, as you say, Magnus explained, taking another step toward her. They were never under illusions about how I felt, Arya. A lot of them, I just asked to pretend. Arya shook her head in confusion. Pretend what? Magnus ran a hand through his hair. It all started years ago, he began, his eyes never leaving hers. When I realized I loved you, that I wanted to mate with you, to make you my queen. But I was worried about my father and what he would say. I knew he would never approve. Arya's breath caught as he continued. So I decided to test the waters, to ask him directly, but to make sure there would be no consequences for you. I asked a kitchen maid to play along, to help spread rumors that she and I were close, intimate even. So when I asked my father about marrying a common girl, he would assume I meant her. You mean, Arya whispered, stunned by the implication. Are you talking about Olivia? Yes, Magnus confirmed, a shadow crossing his face at the memory. As you can imagine, father was furious. He sent her away immediately. Arya didn't have to imagine. She knew because she had heard it all, the argument she had been replaying in her mind for years. That was a test, Magnus explained, and it showed me he would never let me marry you. Until he died, there would be no hope for us, and even less so if he found out I harbored feelings for you. But I couldn't stay away from you completely. So to better hide my feelings, I started developing a reputation. The pieces fell into place with dizzying speed. All these women, all these affairs, even Olivia had been a decoy. When you told your father, Arya's voice shook with the enormity of the revelation. You were talking about me? You heard? Magnus asked, confused for a moment before understanding dawned. You believed it. You thought I was really talking about Olivia. Arya nodded. Is that why you started pushing me away? Magnus asked quietly, the hurt in his eyes taking on new meaning. All this time, I thought you didn't love me back. You were always so closed off, so mocking and defensive. I thought you really were what everyone said. A flirt, a playboy, Arya defended. Even after your father died, After my father died, Magnus interrupted. I'd become addicted to the way it got your attention. The way your eyes would follow me across a room when I danced with someone else. The way your scent would change when another woman touched me. His voice dropped lower. I hoped eventually you'd realize you cared for me if you were that jealous. Oh, Arya breathed, too overwhelmed to say more. Years of misunderstanding, years of pain and longing, all because of a misheard conversation and stubborn pride on both sides. Well, she said finally, trying to sound practical, though her heart was racing. I'm glad we cleared that up. Magnus frowned. You're glad? That's it? What else is there? She countered, the old fear resurfacing. You're a king. I'm a maid. She turned to leave, but his next words stopped her. At least let me read you my last letter. Despite everything, Arya felt a smile tug at her lips. You mean recite? Recite? Yes. Magnus cleared his throat dramatically. To the noble court and citizens of Ironvale, he began. Arya frowned. That's not addressed to me. No, Magnus agreed. This is a copy of the address I made to everyone an hour ago. He continued, As many of you are aware, during the recent royal ball, I was placed under an enchanted sleep through the machinations of foreign agents. This plot was an attempt to force our kingdom into an unwanted alliance through manipulation and coercion. Magnus took a step closer to her as he spoke, his eyes never leaving hers. What you may not know is that the spell could only be broken by true love's kiss. I was awakened by a woman who truly loves me, and whom I truly love in return. Arya's breath caught as he moved closer still. It is therefore my pleasure to announce that I will be making this woman my queen. We shall be wed before the month is out. Tears welled in Arya's eyes as Magnus closed the final distance between them, his voice softening. It's Arya, by the way, he said. Arya will be my queen, should she accept, of course. He paused, his eyes searching hers as he added, They laughed at that part. I think they assumed you'd say yes. Arya couldn't help the small, choked laugh that escaped her. Say yes, Magnus murmured, reaching up to cradle her face in his hands, his thumbs gently brushing away her tears. Magnus, she protested weakly, overwhelmed by the moment. Please, he whispered, his lips now a breath away from hers. Say yes. I'm just a maid, she reminded him, her final defense crumbling rapidly. A maid who proved she can more than handle herself in a crisis, he countered, his eyes filled with warmth and pride. Who spent an entire night protecting me, and this kingdom's interests to the best of her abilities. Who is more than worthy of being queen? Arya gave him a shaky smile. And furthermore, Magnus added, not just a maid, but a woman, the one I've always loved and always will. Before she could think of another objection, he pressed his forehead to hers. Say yes, or I'm getting my hands on that potion, making you drink it, and waking you up to prove to you the depth of my love. Arya laughed, joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside her. Rising on her tiptoes, she closed the final distance between them, pressing her lips to his. Yes, she whispered against his mouth, feeling his smile match her own. Yes. Epilogue. Ever after. 1 month later, Queen Arya of Ironvale stood on the palace balcony, watching the sunrise paint the kingdom in shades of gold. Strong arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back against her husband's chest with a contented sigh. Any regrets, Freckles? Magnus murmured, pressing a kiss to the sensitive spot just below her ear. Just one, she replied thoughtfully. She felt him tense slightly. What's that? Turning in his arms, Arya gave him a mischievous smile. I rather miss having the authority to order you to clean up your own messes. Magnus laughed, the sound rich and warm, as if being queen has stopped you from ordering me around. True, she conceded, rising on her toes to brush her lips against his. Some things never change. And some things, he whispered, pulling her closer, change for the better. As their lips met again, Arya silently agreed. Some things indeed. Thank you so much for listening to my new story. I truly hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter.